I'm Jono Buchanan, and in this video we're going to be looking at live loops within Logic Pro 10.5. Live loops is perhaps the most significant workflow change to Logic that we've seen in the last 20 years. Rather than just working in a linear way, from left to right, one track after another, what live loops allows us to do is to work with little cells of musical information, whether they're audio files or MIDI files, and to put those together in ways we haven't really seen in Logic before. So let's have a look at how that works. You can see that when I first launch Logic, it gives me an opportunity either to work with a project in the way that we're used to, or to launch a live loops set. And within here, what I can do is either just start from scratch, which we're going to do in a moment, or if I want to sort of see what's available, I can come to one of the starter grids that Logic provide, and I can choose one of these, which will give me a whole range of sounds and beat loops that have kind of been pre-organized for me, so I can begin to experiment with the full potential of what live loops can do. But I think it'd be more interesting for us to start from scratch and just to build a live loops session of our own. So let's select a new project, live loops, and hit choose. And straight away, Logic is going to provide me with one audio track and one MIDI track so that I can begin to build a project based on little clips or cells of my choosing. So what I'm going to do is come over to the Apple Loop Browser, which you can see is opened by default, and come into the Genre tab. And what I can then do is to select maybe Electro House. I might decide that I want to start here. And then I might come into Instruments and select Beat so that I can start around maybe a beat loop. And I can select any of these by just auditioning them by clicking on them over here. Okay, when I find one that I like, what I can do is simply just drag it across and put it on the first available audio track, which is here, and you can see that the track will rename to show me the file that I've selected. And you can actually see as well that what I've done is to choose a loop, which is actually part of a family. You can see that there are 3 loops, all of which belong in this same sound set. And up here in the top left-hand corner of Logic, I can actually choose any of those within this drop-down menu. So if I actually decide that I like the second version of this loop better, I can audition it from here and press the little play button to launch it as a clip. Okay, so that's good, and I've remembered I've got a sort of pared back version which might be useful in a little while. So there's my first clip, ready to go, and you can obviously see that it's reading the tempo, which I can change. If I drop the tempo to 120 beats per minute, for instance, obviously the loop will play back at that speed instead. Good. Okay, let's come back up to 120, maybe 4. Okay, so I've now got my first clip launched within here. Now you can actually see that obviously in a way that we're used to within Logic, this is still sitting on a track. I've still got access to my inspector, I can still add effects, I can choose a level for this loop, and so on and so forth. So it's all still familiar within the inspector. I've got an opportunity simply to sort of arrange this sound or add effects to it in a way that I might like. But equally what I can do is to populate this live loop session with more content quite quickly. So let's come out of drums for a second and maybe find a piano loop that could maybe go with this instead. Let's just audition this one. Okay, if I decide I like this kind of epic loop that's happening here, I can drag this in and put it on its own track as well. Now at this point, what I obviously want to do is to launch 2 clips at once, and I can do that down here from this little scene launcher. This button here will launch all clips on this scene. So that's great. So let's suppose that I wanted to have a scene which maybe contained just the beat loop and then another one which contained both. Well, if I hold down Option, I can copy loops from one scene to another. So if I decided I wanted this to be my slightly busier scene, I could then come back here and simply erase that loop from this point here, which means I can then move from one scene to another. Okay, so let's suppose I now want to record some MIDI. You can see that I've got a track here for retro synth. I can open retro synth up and maybe choose a sound of my own. I might decide to come into the bass options here maybe and select, well, let's see what punchy electro sounds like. Okay, this might work. So let's just familiarize ourselves with the key of our loop. Okay, so once I've found the notes that I want to record, in order to record a cell, I can simply just hover over the cell that I want to record into and press the button, and we'll see that Logic will give us a count in, ready for us to make a recording. And when I'm done, I can press stop. Now, I kind of want to edit this MIDI. I'd like to quantize it and do some other things with it as well. And if I double click on a cell, I can see straight away that the editor is available to me. So the first thing I can do is to select all of these notes and I can quantize them so that they're bang in time. And what I also need to do is to remove the end of this so that everything is going to play in time, so that my loop is the right length. I recorded an extra bar there on the end and I don't want that silence. So I've trimmed the end and now my loop is 4 bars long and it should play nicely with the other clips within my this particular scene. Okay, so what we could do now maybe would be to add a little bit of delay to this particular loop. Let's just put in a little bit here so that we've got a chance maybe to select something like an 1/8 note delay, and we'll just take the bottom end out of that and just put a little bit of that in. And we might add a little bit of flutter to it as well, and we could potentially set this back in the mix. So of course I can still keep mixing a live session, a live loop session. I've still got access to all of these effects, and I can just begin to blend instruments like this in a way that I would be if I was working sort of within a regular workflow within Logic. Okay, that's working well. So let's come back out of piano sounds for a second. And what we could do instead perhaps would be to go and find another beat loop, maybe something which will sit nicely on top of this. Let's have a listen to this. Okay, so there's a nice sort of weight in this loop here. Let's add this to this second scene as well, and let's see what that sounds like. Okay, so you can see that I've added an EQ to this first clip here so that the main weight of the loop is coming from this one here. So now that I've got a few things beginning to happen, we could come out of here altogether, perhaps, and begin to look maybe at adding a percussion loop. We could find something. Let's decide that we want to add something with congas maybe. I can search for that. And this might be quite nice. We could add this to this clip as well. Okay, so you can see that I've got one really busy scene and one almost empty one here. But of course, what I can do would be to say, right, I'm going to create a few versions of this now. The main version of this chronograph beat loop, which has got a heavier kick drum, I'm going to add to here. And in fact, I've decided that this is going to be the sort of main clip where everything is going to play together. So I'm going to move everything over here. And this is going to be my sort of biggest version of this this track. And what I'm then going to do is to take a few things out. I'm going to take the piano out of here. For instance, I might add the percussion to this first scene over here, just so we've got a sort of an introductory sort of thing happening. And I might take this beat loop out of this as well. So what I'm then in a position to do is to sort of start managing the arrangement of my project like this. Okay, so you can begin to see how we can start shaping an arrangement even in this sort of record speedy time. Now, of course, what I might want to do is to experiment with actually recording an arrangement from these individual clips. At the moment, we're just in live loops mode. But what I can do up here on the at the top is to launch the sort of traditional Logic arrangement over here on the right-hand side. And what this allows us to do is to start building an arrangement from our live loops over here on the left into the arrangement on the right-hand side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare scene number 1 by clicking here. Just check that that's working and it's ready to go, and that's good. So what we can then do is to press this record button. And what this is going to allow us to do is to start building an arrangement where the live loops will pass the content from the live loops into the main linear arrangement over here on the right-hand side. So we're starting to build a track. Let's see how that might work. I'm going to press record, and then I'm going to launch my first clip, and we'll see how that works. Okay, so really quickly you can see that not only can I trigger entire scenes from the bottom, of course what I can do is to stop or start individual loops within a scene at any given moment. So what we've done is just to begin to shape this arrangement here, you can see that the scenes have given me a starting point, and then what I've done is to record these in. But of course, now that they're in my linear workflow within Logic, of course what I can now do is to start editing them here and taking this sort of scratch arrangement and building it on from this point. Now, what you can also see is that because I've got these different views, I have a chance to switch off live loops here. And when I do that, I'm now back into my traditional user workflow. However, what's interesting is the way that Logic have done this, or Apple have done this within Logic, is to basically create this sort of little separation lane, which is showing me whether or not I'm prioritizing the right-hand side of the window, the linear workflow, or live loops. So what I'm going to do is to turn off record arm, because we're not interested in using those loops anymore. I'm going to turn off live loops, and I'm going to make sure that what I've done is to stop all of the clips as they exist within the live loop area, so that I can now come back to the beginning here and just begin to work with the files now within this linear Logic arrangement. So you can begin to see that, of course, it's a perfect match for what we recorded when we were working with live loops. Now, I've deliberately decided to start from scratch so you can see this from the ground up. But if you want to see just how deep these projects can go, I would definitely suggest that what you do is to experiment with some of the sort of tutorial content or the sessions that Logic have put together for you. If we close this project, I'm not going to worry about saving this for now. Instead, what we'll do is we'll open from template and we'll come down to one of the starter grids, and perhaps if I have a look at this one, you can begin to see the full potential of live loops. This is a much busier arrangement. You can see that it's got many more tracks. The inspector is closed, but if we open it up, we'll get a chance to see which sounds have been assigned to these individual cells, and obviously we can begin to experiment with the arrangement here as well, just by having a listen through the way that some of this has been arranged. So you can see that what we've got here is a much busier, fuller arrangement, but it's based on exactly the same ideas that we went through in our version that we built from scratch. All of these individual cells are either audio files or MIDI clips, and what we can do within Live Loops is to begin experimenting with arrangements before we then record them into the more linear version of Logic that we're used to, where we can then move our productions on.